Girl sees elderly woman with snake around her neck about to die, then she does this. Comment what you thought of this story, giving it a score from 0 to 10, and tell me which city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story and get to know you better, so subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The March morning in Oakhaven stretched lazily through the streets, with the sun shyly warming the cobblestones and the typical Monday morning hustle starting slowly. Eleanor Vance, 70 years old, was walking through the central square with uncertain steps, feeling the familiar dizziness that had been with her since the beginning of the week. Her grey hair was disheveled, and her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her worn leather handbag. On the other side of the square, near the steps of the old church, a small, frail figure caught the attention of a few passers-by. Lily, 4 years old, was sitting on the marble steps, her brown eyes watching every person who passed. Her clothes were dirty and torn. Her bare feet showed early calluses, and in her small hands she held out a crumpled plastic cup hoping for a few coins. The girl had learned to recognize the types of people who walked through the square. There were those who quickly looked away, those who pretended not to see, and the rare ones who stopped to leave a coin. Eleanor, however, was different. She was walking strangely, as if something were disturbing her balance. It was when Eleanor approached the ancient trees surrounding the central fountain that Lily noticed something terrible. Coiled around the elderly lady's neck, a dark-colored snake was moving slowly, tightening its grip. Eleanor seemed not to fully realize the gravity of the situation, her pale, confused face showing signs that she was about to faint. Lily dropped the cup on the ground and ran towards the lady without a second thought. Her small feet pattered on the pavement with determination, and when she got close to Eleanor, she stretched her tiny hands towards the reptile. The snake, startled by the child's sudden movement, relaxed its pressure and slithered away, disappearing among the nearby bushes. Eleanor staggered and almost fell, but Lily held her hand with a surprising strength for such a small child. The lady's eyes met the girl's, and in that moment, something deep moved in her heart. It had been decades since she had seen such courage and pure kindness in a single gesture. "My child," Eleanor whispered, her voice thick with emotion and shock. "You saved my life." Lily just smiled shyly, her large eyes reflecting a premature wisdom shaped by the hardships of life on the streets. "You were in danger," she said in her childish but firm voice. "I couldn't let anything bad happen." Eleanor looked more closely at the girl before her. Her worn clothes, the dirt on her small hands, the hair that clearly hadn't seen a comb in days. But most of all, she saw something in her eyes that she immediately recognized, the same expression she had seen in the mirror during the most difficult moments of her own life. "Where are your parents, dear?" Eleanor asked, crouching down to be at Lily's level. The girl's expression changed instantly. Her small shoulders slumped slightly, and she looked at the ground. "My mum. She left a long time ago. I don't know where she is." "And your father?" "I never knew him," Lily answered with a naturalness that broke Eleanor's heart. "I live here in the square. People sometimes give me food or a little money." Eleanor felt tears welling up in her eyes. How had such a small child ended up alone in the world? And how, even in her vulnerability, had she found the courage to help a stranger? "How long have you been living here, my dear?" "I think it's been about 6 months, Lily said, trying to count on her little fingers. "Since Mommy Rosalind didn't come back home. She said she was going to take care of some important things and would be back, but—" The girl's voice failed her and she swallowed the tears that threatened to fall. Rosalind. The name echoed in Eleanor's mind like a distant bell. There was something familiar about that name, something that stirred her most recent memories, but she couldn't pinpoint exactly where she had heard it before. "Come with me," Eleanor said, holding out her hand to Lily. "I can't let such a brave and good girl continue to live on the street. You're coming home with me." Lily hesitated for a moment. She had learned to distrust adults, especially after the last difficult months. But there was something in Eleanor's gentle voice, in her kind eyes, that made the girl feel a safety she hadn't experienced in a long time. "Are you sure?" Lily asked, her small voice filled with hope. "I'm absolutely sure," Eleanor replied, holding the girl's hand firmly. "A person who saves someone's life deserves to have her own life saved too." As they walked through the streets of Oakhaven towards Eleanor's house, the elderly woman couldn't help but think about how life had strange circles. She had left home that morning feeling lost and tired, as if every day were a struggle against the loneliness that had consumed her since she retired from the candy factory. And now, she was returning with a child by her side, a girl who had appeared in her life like an unexpected gift. The Eleanor and Sons Candy Factory had been the pride of 3 generations of the Vance family. Eleanor had dedicated 50 years of her life to that business, watching it grow from a small confectionery into one of the main suppliers of traditional sweets in the region. But in the last 2 years, since she had passed the management to her cousin Declan, things didn't seem the same. "Lily," Eleanor said, as they climbed the hill leading to the residential neighborhood where she lived, "that's a very beautiful name. Do you know what it means?" The girl shook her head, looking with curiosity at the houses they passed, so different from the cold church steps where she had slept for the past few nights. "The lily is a very powerful flower, a symbol of purity and protection. It represents caring for people and saving them when they are in danger. I think your mother chose the perfect name for you." A shy smile formed on Lily's face. It was the first time in months that someone had spoken of her name with affection, making her remember that she had value and importance. When they finally arrived at Eleanor's house, a simple but well-kept building with a flowery garden in front, Lily stopped at the door and looked up in admiration. It was very different from any place she had lived before. "This will be your home too, if you want it," Eleanor said, opening the wooden door that creaked slightly. Inside, the house smelled of cinnamon and vanilla, aromas that vaguely reminded Lily of happier times. The decor was simple but cozy, with well-preserved antique furniture and family photographs scattered on the walls and shelves. "First, let's take care of you," Eleanor said, guiding Lily to the bathroom. A warm bath, clean clothes, and then some real food. As she prepared the bath for the girl, Eleanor couldn't stop thinking about the name Rosalind and the strange sense of familiarity it sparked. There was something important her mind was trying to connect, but it remained just out of reach. On the other side of town, at the candy factory, Declan Martin arrived later than usual, as had become his habit in recent months. At 42, he maintained a polished appearance that hid his sleepless nights and the constant tension that followed him. His dark, ever-alert eyes scanned the factory floor, checking if everything was running according to his very specific instructions. Declan greeted a few employees with his usual forced smile and headed to his office, closing the door with more force than necessary. There, among piles of papers and financial reports, he tried to maintain control over secrets that could destroy not only his career, but the entire reputation of the Vance family, built over decades. His nervous fingers drummed on the wooden desk as he looked out the window towards the quality control lab, an area that had become the source of his greatest worries. There, months ago, an employee had started asking inconvenient questions about processes and ingredients, questions that could have devastating consequences if the answers reached the wrong ears. The phone rang, interrupting his dark thoughts. It was one of his creditors, demanding payment for debts that had accumulated from his constant losses at the city's gambling tables. Declan ended the call with vague promises and impossible deadlines, feeling the weight of the pressure that forced him to make increasingly risky decisions. At that moment, as Eleanor helped Lily get dressed in clean clothes that had belonged to grandchildren who rarely visited. An invisible but powerful connection was forming between two worlds that would soon discover they were more intertwined than either of them could imagine. The girl who had saved a lady's life in the square was about to find out that her own salvation would be just the first step on a journey that would reveal painful truths about her past and test the limits of love and human courage. 3 days had passed since Lily arrived at Eleanor's house, and the transformation in the girl was visible to the naked eye. Her hair, now clean and combed, shone in the morning light, streaming through the kitchen window. The clothes that fit her, carefully chosen by Eleanor from pieces she had saved from her grandchildren, made her look like a normal child for the first time in months. Eleanor watched Lily playing in the small backyard, where the girl had discovered a passion for talking to the little birds that visited the makeshift feeder. It was impressive how this child could find joy in the simplest things, even after everything she had been through. "Grandma Eleanor," Lily said, running into the house with her cheeks flushed from playing outside. She had started calling the lady Grandma naturally, and Eleanor's heart warmed every time she heard that sweet word. "What is it, my dear?" Eleanor replied, drying her hands on her apron before crouching down to the girl's level. "Can I help you make the sweets? I promise I'll be careful," Lily said, her eyes shining with anticipation. Eleanor had spent the morning preparing fudge and caramels for a small order from her neighbors, a way to keep busy in retirement. The factory was in Declan's hands, but she couldn't stay completely away from the art of candy making she had learned from her own grandmother decades ago. "Of course, you can help me," Eleanor said, lifting Lily so she could reach the kitchen counter. "But first, you need to wash your little hands very well." As Lily washed her hands with exaggerated care, Eleanor couldn't help but think how the girl's presence had changed the atmosphere of her home. After 2 years of living alone since her husband Arthur had passed, the house was once again filled with life and purpose. "Grandma Eleanor," Lily said as she helped roll the fudge, "do you know a lady named Rosalind?" Eleanor's hands stopped mid-motion. The name had come up again, and this time she couldn't ignore the strange feeling it provoked. "Why do you ask, dear? It was my mum's name. Sometimes I wonder if anyone around here knew her. She worked at a place that made sweet foods," Lily said with the naturalness of children when talking about subjects adults considered complex. Eleanor's heart raced. A place that made sweet foods. Rosalind. The pieces began to fall into place in her mind like a puzzle finally revealing its image. 2 years ago, she vaguely remembered a new employee in the factory's quality control lab, a young and dedicated woman who had worked there for a few months before disappearing without explanation. "What was your mother like, Lily? Can you tell me about her?" Eleanor asked, trying to keep her voice calm as she processed this revelation. "She was very pretty," Lily said, concentrating on making perfect little balls of candy. "She had long, dark hair, and she always smelled like flowers. She used to sing to me before I went to sleep, and sometimes she brought work home. It was some papers with numbers and words I didn't understand." The description perfectly matched Eleanor's fragmented memories of Rosalind Fisher, the employee who had abruptly left the factory. At the time, Declan had explained that she had found a better job in another city, but now, looking at Lily, Eleanor began to question that version of events. "Lily, do you know why your mother left?" Eleanor asked, choosing her words carefully so as not to scare the child. "She said she had discovered something very important and needed to tell people who could help. But before that, I had to stay hidden because there were bad people who might want to hurt me," Lily said, her voice growing quieter as she spoke. "She left me with a lady named Mrs. Marlene, but after a while the lady got sick and couldn't take care of me anymore." Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. If Rosalind had discovered something important at the factory and had felt the need to hide her own daughter, it meant something very serious was happening under her supervision without her knowledge. At that moment, the phone rang, interrupting the conversation. It was Declan, his voice sounding tense over the line. "Aunt Eleanor, I need to talk to you urgently. Can I come by this afternoon?" "Of course, Declan. Did something happen at the factory?" "Not over the phone, Auntie. It's better if we talk in person. See you later." Eleanor hung up the phone with a bad feeling growing in her chest. The coincidence was too great. Lily revealing details about her mother who worked at the factory, and Declan wanting an urgent conversation on the same day. "Grandma Eleanor, are you sad?" Lily asked, noticing the change in the older woman's expression. "No, dear. I'm just thinking about a few things. How about we finish our sweets?" Eleanor said, trying to return to the task, but her mind was far away. At 3 in the afternoon, Declan arrived at Eleanor's house, driving his imported car faster than usual. He had spent the entire morning at the factory trying to locate some documents that seemed to have vanished from the archives, and the anxiety was beginning to affect even his usually impeccable appearance. When Eleanor opened the door, Declan couldn't hide his surprise at seeing a small child hiding behind his aunt's legs. "Auntie, who is this girl?" Declan asked, his voice carrying a tension he couldn't completely disguise. "This is Lily. She's going to live with me from now on," Eleanor said, placing a protective hand on the girl's shoulder. "Lily, this is my nephew Declan. He takes care of the factory where Grandma used to work." Lily looked at Declan with curiosity, but something in the man's expression made her stay close to Eleanor. There was a hardness in his eyes that reminded her of some bad people she had met during her months on the streets. "Auntie, I need to talk to you about factory business. Maybe it's better if the girl plays in another room," Declan said, clearly uncomfortable with Lily's presence. "Lily can play right here while we talk. She's very well behaved," Eleanor replied, noticing Declan's strange reaction to the child. Declan sat in the armchair in the living room, but kept his eyes constantly darting towards Lily, who had settled on the floor with some simple toys Eleanor had bought for her. "Auntie, we've been having some problems at the factory. Irregularities in the quality reports, discrepancies in production costs. I'm trying to sort everything out, but I've discovered that some old files are missing," Declan said, his words sounding rehearsed. "What kind of irregularities?" Eleanor asked, her 50 years of management experience making her realize there was more to the story than Declan was telling. "Nothing too serious, probably just employee error. But I wanted to know if you remember anything strange from the last few months before you retired. Maybe an employee acting suspiciously or asking inappropriate questions." Eleanor looked at Lily, who was playing silently but clearly paying attention to the conversation. An idea began to form in her mind, connecting Declan's words with what Lily had said about her mother. "Declan, do you remember Rosalind? She worked in the lab for a few months before I retired." Declan's reaction was immediate and revealing. His eyes hardened, and he shot a quick glance at Lily before answering. "Rosalind? Yes, of course. A problematic employee. Always questioning procedures, making insinuations about non-existent irregularities. It was for the best when she left." "Jai, she said she had found another job," Eleanor said, carefully watching Declan's reaction. "That's what she claimed. People like that always make excuses when they're confronted about their poor performance," Declan said, but his voice sounded forced. Lily had stopped playing and was staring intently at Declan. There was something familiar in his tone of voice, something that sparked fragmented and uncomfortable memories in her young mind. "Uncle Declan," Lily said suddenly, her voice small but clear, "did you know my mommy Rosalind?" The silence that followed was deafening. Declan looked at the girl as if he had seen a ghost, and Eleanor realized that her suspicions were being confirmed in a more dramatic way than she had imagined. "Your mother?" Declan asked, his voice almost a whisper. "What is your mother's full name?" "Rosalind Fisher. She worked at a candy place and always brought papers home, papers with numbers that she would look at and get very sad," Lily said, innocent of the emotional bombshell she had just dropped in the living room. Declan stood up abruptly from the armchair, his face pale and his hands trembling slightly. The connections he had feared for months were materializing right before his eyes, in the form of a small child who had no idea of the power of the information she carried. "Auntie, I have to go. I have an important meeting at the factory," he said, heading quickly for the door. "Declan, wait," Eleanor called, but he was already leaving behind a tense atmosphere and unanswered questions. Eleanor looked at Lily, who had gone back to playing as if nothing had happened, completely oblivious to the impact of her words. At that moment, the 70-year-old woman realized that the arrival of this girl in her life had not been just an act of charity. It was the beginning of a discovery that could shake the foundations of everything she believed about her family and her legacy. Night had fallen over Oakhaven when Eleanor finally managed to put Lily to bed. The girl had asked many questions about the nervous uncle who'd visited the house, but Eleanor managed to distract her with stories and promises of making cinnamon rolls the next day. Now, alone in the kitchen with a cup of chamomile tea, the 70-year-old woman tried to process everything she had discovered. The pieces of the puzzle were fitting together in a disturbing way. Rosalind had worked in the factory's quality control lab, had discovered something that worried her deeply, and then had disappeared, leaving a small daughter behind. Declan's reaction to learning that Lily was Rosalind's daughter had been too revealing to ignore. Eleanor got up and went to the small office where she kept her personal papers. Among old documents and family photographs, she searched for the folder where she kept some records from when she was still actively working at the factory. Her memory was no longer as sharp as it used to be, but she remembered saving some notes about irregularities she had noticed in the last few months before she retired. She found the dusty folder at the bottom of a drawer. Inside there were handwritten notes, some accounts that didn't add up, and a letter she had started writing to the company's accountant but had never sent. Rereading her own words, Eleanor remembered the suspicions she had at the time about discrepancies in production costs and subtle changes in the quality of some products. At the time, she had attributed these differences to the natural adjustments any business goes through, especially during a change in management. Declan had gradually taken on more responsibilities as she prepared for retirement, and small changes in processes seemed normal. But now, with the information Lily had inadvertently revealed, these irregularities took on a much more sinister meaning. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was almost 10 at night, an unusual time to receive calls. "Hello?" Eleanor answered cautiously. "Mrs. Vance? This is Sebastian from the factory lab. I'm sorry to call so late, but I need to talk to you urgently." Sebastian Oliver had been an employee at the factory for over 15 years, a hard-working and reliable man who had always shown loyalty to the Vance family. If he was calling outside of work hours, something important was happening. "Sebastian, what is it?" "Mrs. Vance, I can't talk over the phone, but I really need to talk to you. It's about Rosalind, the woman who worked with me in the lab. There are things you need to know." Eleanor's heart pounded. "Sebastian, can you come here tomorrow morning, before normal factory hours?" "I can, Mrs. Vance, and if you could, don't mention to Mr. Declan that I'm coming to see you. It's important." After she hung up the phone, Eleanor felt even more restless. Sebastian was known for his discretion and good sense. If he was asking for secrecy regarding Declan, the situation was more serious than she had imagined. Across town, Declan paced nervously in the factory office, long after normal business hours. He had sent the employees home early and stayed behind alone, trying to locate documents that could compromise his position. The appearance of Rosalind's daughter at Eleanor's house had set off all his danger alarms. Declan opened the safe behind his desk and took out a red folder containing some of the most compromising records of his activities. For the past 2 years, he had systematically replaced high-quality ingredients with cheaper versions, keeping the same selling prices and pocketing the difference. Initially, the amounts were small, intended to cover occasional gambling debts, but as his losses mounted, the diversions had become larger and riskier. Rosalind had discovered the irregularities by chance when she noticed discrepancies between the raw material purchase reports and the quality tests of the final products. She had started asking questions, documenting her findings, and finally confronted Declan directly. The memory of that confrontation still made Declan break out in a cold sweat. Rosalind had entered his office on a Friday afternoon, carrying a folder full of evidence. She hadn't been aggressive or accusatory. On the contrary, she had shown genuine concern for the company's reputation and suggested they find a way to correct the problems discreetly. But Declan was too desperate to accept any solution that involved admitting his mistakes. Instead, he had used Rosalind's financial difficulties as a single mother to try to convince her to accept a share of the profits in exchange for her silence. When she flatly refused, he had resorted to veiled threats about her job security and the difficulties she would face finding another job with a young child to support. What Declan hadn't anticipated was Rosalind's moral courage. Instead of submitting to blackmail, she had collected even more evidence and announced her intention to report everything to the proper authorities. It was then that Declan had crossed a line he never thought he was capable of crossing. He had forged documents that made it look like Rosalind was stealing money from the company, creating false evidence that she was diverting funds to personal accounts. When he confronted Rosalind with these fabricated accusations, he made it clear that if she continued with her unfounded accusations, he would have no choice but to turn the case over to the police. Rosalind had been desperate. As a single mother with a young daughter, she couldn't risk being arrested for a crime she hadn't committed, especially when Declan had the resources and connections to make the false accusations seem convincing. The solution she had found was to disappear, leaving Lily temporarily with an acquaintance until she could find a way to expose Declan without putting herself at risk. But months had passed, and Declan had assumed she would never return to cause trouble. Now, Rosalind's daughter was at Eleanor's house, and Declan knew it was only a matter of time before the truth started to come out. He needed to act quickly to protect his interests. Declan picked up the phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. On the other end of the line, a deep voice answered. "Carl, I need a favor. It's about that situation we discussed a few months ago. We might have a problem re-emerging." Carl Morris owned one of the underground gambling dens Declan frequented, and besides the betting activities, he maintained a network of contacts that could be useful for resolving delicate situations when necessary. It wasn't exactly organized crime, but it definitely wasn't legal. "Declan, my friend, what kind of problem?" "Someone from the past might be coming back to cause trouble. I need to know where this person is and what they're planning." "That's going to be expensive, Declan. And you already owe me a considerable amount from your last visits here." "I know, but if this is handled properly, I can guarantee that all my debts will be paid with interest." "All right, give me the details." Meanwhile, at Eleanor's house, Lily woke up in the middle of the night from a nightmare. She had dreamed of her mother crying and trying to tell her something important, but the words wouldn't come out, only silent tears that wet her face. The girl got out of bed and walked to Eleanor's room, knocking lightly on the door. "Grandma Eleanor, can I sleep with you? I had a bad dream." Of course, my dear. Come here, Eleanor said, opening her arms to welcome the child. As Lily snuggled beside her, the girl began to talk about the dream hesitantly. Grandma, in my dream, Mommy was trying to tell me a very important secret. She seemed scared, but she also seemed angry. And there was a man she didn't like, a man who wore a suit just like Uncle Declan. Eleanor felt a shiver run down her spine. Even in her sleep, Lily's mind was processing memories and making connections that her conscious mind couldn't yet fully articulate. Lily, can you remember anything else about the last days you spent with your mother? Any conversation she had, or people who came to the house? She got very nervous after a man in a suit came to the house. He said things that made Mommy cry. After that, she started hiding papers and told me we might have to leave town. Do you remember anything else about this man? Lily closed her eyes, concentrating. He had a deep voice and didn't really smile. And he had a small scar here, she said, touching her own left eyebrow. Eleanor knew that scar. Declan had hurt himself in a childhood game decades ago, and the mark had remained as a small white line interrupting his left eyebrow. Lily's description left no doubt that Declan had confronted Rosalind in person, something he had completely denied in their afternoon conversation. As she rocked Lily back to sleep, Eleanor made a decision. The next morning, she would listen to what Sebastian had to say, and then she would confront Declan with everything she had discovered. The truth about Rosalind's disappearance needed to come to light, not just for justice, but for Lily's safety and for the preservation of the integrity of the company her family had built with so much effort over 3 generations. Dawn arrived grey and overcast in Oakhaven, with a fine drizzle that left the streets slippery and the air thick with moisture. Sebastian Oliver arrived at Eleanor's house at 6:30 in the morning, an hour before the factory's workday began. His 52 years seemed heavier that morning, and his calloused hands trembled slightly as he knocked on the door. Eleanor received him still in her robe, having woken up early to make coffee and ensure Lily was still fast asleep. The girl had had a restless night after the nightmare, and Eleanor preferred she not be part of this conversation. "Come in, Sebastian. Would you like some coffee?" Eleanor offered, guiding him to the kitchen. "Thank you, Mrs. Vance. Sorry to bother you so early, but I couldn't sleep all night thinking about this," Sebastian said, gratefully accepting the steaming cup. "You can speak freely. What do you have to tell me about Rosalind?" Sebastian took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts before he began. "Mrs. Vance, Rosalind didn't leave the factory because she found a better job. She left because she discovered things she shouldn't have, and Mr. Declan made serious threats against her." The words confirmed Eleanor's worst fears. "What kind of threats?" "She came to me in the last week before she disappeared, completely desperate. She said she had found evidence that ingredients were being switched in the products, and when she confronted Mr. Declan, he said that if she told anyone, he would have her arrested for theft." Arrested for theft, but Rosalind would never steal anything. "I know that, Mrs. Vance. Everyone in the lab knew she was too honest for her own good, but Mr. Declan had documents, papers showing money transfers to accounts that were supposedly hers. But she swore she had never seen those documents in her life." Eleanor felt the ground move beneath her feet. The situation was even worse than she had imagined. "Sebastian, are you sure about what you're telling me?" "I am, Mrs. Vance, and there's more. Rosalind gave me something before she left. She said that if anything happened to her, I should give it to you." Sebastian took a time-yellowed envelope from his inner coat pocket. "She made me promise I would only deliver it if I was sure it was safe, and that I should wait for you to ask about her first." With trembling hands, Eleanor opened the envelope. Inside were several sheets with detailed notes in Rosalind's handwriting, photographs of documents, and a letter addressed specifically to her. Mrs. Vance, the letter began, if Mr. Sebastian is giving this to you, it's because something has happened to me, or because someone has finally started asking questions about my disappearance. I discovered that your nephew, Declan, is tampering with the factory's products, replacing quality ingredients with cheap, toxic versions, and pocketing the difference. I have proof of everything, but he threatened me with fake documents that would make it look like I stole money from the company. As a single mother, I can't risk being arrested, so I need to leave until I can find a safe way to expose the truth. My daughter Lily is temporarily with Mrs. Marlene on Flower Street, but if something happens to me, please take care of her. She's the most precious thing I have in the world. Eleanor had to lean on the table to keep from falling. Lily was here, in her house, because her own mother had foreseen that something terrible could happen. The girl hadn't been abandoned. She had been protected by a brave mother who preferred to sacrifice herself rather than put her daughter in danger. Sebastian, how long have you been holding on to this? 7 months, Mrs. Vance. Rosalind disappeared shortly after she gave it to me. I tried to find news of her, but it was as if she had vanished from the face of the earth. And why did you never come to me before? Because I was afraid, Mrs. Vance. Mr. Declan always made it clear that any employee who made baseless accusations against management would be fired on the spot and would have a hard time finding a job anywhere in the region. I have a family to support. I couldn't take the risk. But what changed now? Yesterday, after Mr. Declan found out you were taking care of a girl, he showed up at the factory very nervous. He started asking questions about former employees, specifically about who had contact with Rosalind. And he told me to review all the lab files to make sure there were no irregular documents that could cause misunderstandings. Eleanor closed her eyes, processing the enormity of the betrayal. Declan was not just a nephew who had made bad decisions because of his vices. He was a man who had systematically destroyed the family company's reputation and threatened an innocent employee to protect his crimes. Sebastian, do you think Rosalind is still alive? I don't know, Mrs. Vance, but for the girl's sake, I hope so. Rosalind loved that child more than life itself. If she could come back, she would have already. At that moment, a small voice echoed from the hallway. Grandma Eleanor, can I come down? Lily had woken up and was at the top of the stairs, wearing the pajamas Eleanor had bought for her, her hair disheveled from sleep. Of course, my dear. Come have breakfast, Eleanor said, quickly putting away Rosalind's papers. Sebastian looked at Lily and his eyes filled with tears. My goodness, she's the spitting image of her mother. Same eyes, same gentle way. Do you know my mommy? Lily asked, approaching Sebastian with curiosity. I did, dear. Your mother was a very special person, very brave. Is she coming back to get me? The girl's innocent question broke the hearts of the two adults present. Sebastian looked at Eleanor, who made a subtle gesture asking him not to reveal anything yet. Your mother loves you very much, Lily, and wherever she is, she's sure that you are safe and happy here with Mrs. Vance. After breakfast, Sebastian left with the promise to keep in touch and to stay alert for any suspicious moves from Declan at the factory. Eleanor spent the rest of the morning rereading Rosalind's documents, each page revealing new details about the extent of Declan's corruption. The photographs clearly showed the replacement of granulated sugar with a cheap artificial sweetener in large quantities, the switch from Belgian chocolate to lower-quality domestic versions, and the use of chemical preservatives in products sold as all-natural. The reduced costs were significant, and the extra profits Declan pocketed amounted to thousands of dollars monthly. But what shocked Eleanor the most were the medical reports Rosalind had managed to obtain, showing that some of the chemical preservatives Declan was using were potentially harmful to small children and people with allergies. The Vance factory, which for 3 generations had prided itself on producing safe, quality sweets for families was putting its consumers' health at risk for greed. Around noon, the phone rang. It was Declan, his voice tense and controlled. "Aunt Eleanor, I'd like to talk to you again. Can I come by after lunch?" "Of course, Declan. Actually, I have a few things to discuss with you too." "Great. And Auntie, would it be possible for you to arrange some activity for the girl somewhere else during our conversation? What I have to say is strictly about family business." Eleanor sensed Declan's attempt to keep Lily away from the conversation. "Don't worry, Declan. I'll make sure we have privacy." After hanging up, Eleanor called her neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, asking her to take Lily to play with her granddaughter for the afternoon. It was important to protect the girl from what was coming, but it was also crucial that she be in a safe place, far from any of Declan's influence. As she helped Lily get ready for the visit to the neighbor's house, Eleanor watched the girl's innocent face and felt a fierce determination grow in her chest. Rosalind had fought to protect her daughter and expose the truth. Now it was up to her to continue that fight, even if it meant confronting a member of her own family. "Grandma Eleanor, why do you look worried?" Lily asked, noticing the tension on the older woman's face. "Sometimes adults have complicated problems to solve, my dear, but don't worry, Grandma will take care of everything. Like my mommy used to do when I was scared." "Exactly like your mommy used to do. Now go play with Lucy and be a good girl. When you come back, we might have some important news." Lily kissed Eleanor on the cheek and left excitedly for the neighbor's house, unaware that her life was about to change again. This time, Eleanor hoped for the much better. At 3 in the afternoon, Declan arrived at Eleanor's house carrying a folder of documents and an expression that mixed nervousness with determination. He had spent the entire morning preparing a version of the facts that could protect his position, but the presence of Rosalind's daughter had complicated all his plans. The confrontation that was about to happen would decide not only the future of the Vance factory, but also the fate of a girl who had lost too much for her age and deserved, finally, to find the truth about her mother's disappearance. Declan entered Eleanor's house with a forced smile that couldn't hide the tension in his eyes. He carried a brown leather folder and a bouquet of flowers in a transparent attempt to soften what was to come. "Aunt Eleanor, I brought these flowers for you, and I'm glad you managed to arrange something for the girl to do. We need to discuss some very serious family matters." Eleanor accepted the flowers without enthusiasm and led him to the living room. She had spent the last few hours mentally organizing how to approach what she had discovered, but looking at Declan now, she felt a mixture of anger and sadness that almost left her speechless. "Sit down, Declan. I also have some important things to discuss." Declan opened his folder and took out some documents, spreading them on the coffee table with calculated movements. "Auntie, I've discovered some very disturbing information about irregularities at the factory. Unfortunately, they seem to be related to former employees you may have known." "What kind of irregularities?" Eleanor asked, keeping her voice neutral as she watched Declan's every move. "Embezzlement, falsification of reports, theft of raw materials, all very well orchestrated by someone who had privileged access to the company's systems." Declan paused dramatically, feigning reluctance. "Auntie, I'm sorry to be the one to tell you this, but the main suspect is an employee named Rosalind Fisher." Eleanor felt her blood boil but maintained her composure. "Go on." "Look at these documents," Declan said, showing papers that looked official. "Bank transfers to her personal accounts, falsified reports she signed, receipts for the sale of ingredients she diverted. When I discovered all this, I confronted her, but before we could resolve the situation properly, she fled the city." "That's an interesting story, Declan," Eleanor said, her voice taking on an icy tone. "But I have a different version of the facts." Declan's smile wavered slightly. "What do you mean?" Eleanor stood up and went to get the envelope Sebastian had given her. I received some information this morning that clarifies a lot about Rosalind's disappearance. Auntie, I hope you haven't believed gossip from disgruntled employees. You know how hard it is to run a company. There are always people trying to create problems. Sit down and listen, Declan. The authority in Eleanor's voice made him stop talking immediately. I know exactly what you did to Rosalind, and I know why she had to run. Eleanor began to read from the documents Rosalind had left, describing in detail the adulterations Declan had made to the products. With each revelation, his face grew paler. Replacement of granulated sugar with cheap sweeteners, swapping Belgian chocolate for lower-quality domestic versions, use of banned chemical preservatives in products sold as natural, Eleanor listed, her voice rising in intensity. All documented, photographed with dates and amounts. Auntie, this is ridiculous. These are baseless accusations from a dishonest employee who you threatened with falsified documents, Eleanor exploded, her patience finally exhausted. Rosalind has a 4-year-old daughter, Declan. You used that against her, told her she would be arrested for crimes she didn't commit. Declan was silent for a moment, realizing his lies weren't working. When he spoke again, all pretense of family concern had vanished. Auntie, you don't understand the pressures I face running the factory. Costs are always rising, competition is fierce, and I needed to find ways to keep the company profitable. Keep it profitable or fund your gambling addictions. The accusation hit Declan like a punch. How did you know about that? Because I'm not blind or deaf, Declan. For months I've noticed your strange behavior, your absences, your constant nervousness, and now I understand why. Declan stood up abruptly, starting to pace the room. All right, yes, I have some personal problems, but that doesn't change the fact that the company was facing real difficulties. So you decided to risk our customers' health? To put toxic preservatives in sweets consumed by children? To destroy the reputation our family built over 3 generations? I was going to fix everything. They were just temporary measures until I could pay off my debts and reorganize the finances. And Rosalind, what did you do to her? Declan stopped pacing and looked directly at Eleanor. For a moment, she saw something dangerous in his eyes, a coldness she had never noticed before. Rosalind was a problem that needed to be solved. She didn't understand that sometimes you have to make sacrifices for the greater good of the company. Where is she, Declan? I don't know. She just disappeared after we talked. I just made it clear to her that it would be in her best interest not to spread harmful rumors about the company. You threatened her. You forced a single mother to abandon her daughter for fear of being arrested for crimes she didn't commit. She made her choice, Declan shouted, completely losing his composure. I offered alternatives, but she preferred to be dramatic and create an impossible situation. At that moment, the phone rang. Eleanor answered, still keeping an eye on Declan. Mrs. Vance, this is Mrs. Peterson. The girl is fine, but something strange happened here. A man came by asking about her, wanting to know if she really lives with you and for how long. Eleanor's blood ran cold. What kind of man? Well-dressed, in a suit, with an expensive car. Said he was a family relative and was checking on the child's situation. But something about him gave me a bad feeling, so I didn't answer anything. Eleanor looked at Declan, who was listening to the conversation with too much attention. Thank you for letting me know, Mrs. Peterson. I'm coming to get Lily right now. Auntie, where are you going? Declan asked as she started towards the door. To get the girl. This conversation is over, Declan. Wait, Auntie. I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation. Declan's voice had changed again, now laced with a subtle but clear threat. If these baseless accusations about me get out, it won't just be my future at risk. The reputation of the entire Vance family will be destroyed. The family's reputation is already being destroyed by your actions, Declan. And the girl, do you really think it's a good idea to keep her here? Considering all this mess, maybe she'd be better off somewhere more appropriate. There are specialized institutions for taking care of abandoned children. The veiled threat against Lily made Eleanor turn around slowly. Are you threatening me, Declan? I'm just suggesting you think about the consequences of your actions for everyone involved. Eleanor walked to the phone and started dialing. I'm calling my lawyer, and then I'm calling the authorities. Declan moved quickly, placing his hand over the phone to stop the call. Auntie, you don't want to do that. Not for the reasons you're thinking. Take your hand off my phone. Listen carefully, Auntie. I have friends who can make life very difficult for people who create unnecessary problems. Not just for you, but for any child under your care. The mask had completely fallen off. Eleanor was looking at a man who had not only betrayed the family's trust, but was willing to threaten an innocent child to protect his crimes. You have 5 minutes to get out of my house, Eleanor said, her voice trembling not with fear, but with pure rage. Auntie, you're making a very serious mistake. In a few days, you'll realize it would have been much wiser to accept a friendly agreement. Get out! Declan gathered his fake documents and headed for the door, but before leaving, he turned one last time. Take good care of the girl, Auntie. It would be a shame if something happened to her because of your stubbornness. After he left, Eleanor stood in the living room for a few minutes, trying to process what had just happened. The nephew she had raised like a son, whom she had trusted with the legacy of 3 generations, was not just a thief and a liar. He was a dangerous man who would not hesitate to use an innocent child as a weapon. She picked up the phone and called Mrs. Peterson. I'm coming to get Lily now, and Mrs. Peterson, don't let anyone else near her until I get there. As she left the house towards her neighbors, Eleanor knew the battle was just beginning. But she also knew she was no longer fighting just for the truth about Rosalind's disappearance. She was now fighting for the safety and future of a girl who had become the most precious thing in her life. What she didn't know was that Declan had already set in motion a plan that would make the situation far more dangerous than she could ever imagine. The walk to Mrs. Peterson's house felt endless to Eleanor. Every shadow between the houses, every person passing on the street made her heart race. Declan's threats echoed in her mind, and she wondered if she had underestimated the gravity of the situation she was getting into. When she arrived at her neighbor's house, she found Lily playing peacefully in the yard with Lucy, Mrs. Peterson's granddaughter. The 2 girls were building doll houses with scraps of wood and flowers, completely oblivious to the dangers surrounding the younger one's life. "Grandma Eleanor!" Lily shouted happily, running to hug her. "Look what Lucy and I made." "It's beautiful, my dear," Eleanor said, hugging the girl tighter than usual. "But now we need to go home." Mrs. Peterson approached, her expression worried. "Eleanor, that man came back an hour ago. This time he didn't ask questions, just stood across the street watching the house. It gave me the creeps." "Thank you for taking care of her, Mrs. Peterson. And please, if anyone else shows up asking about Lily, don't say anything and let me know immediately." Back at her house, Eleanor locked all the doors and windows, something she had never done during the day in all her years living there. Lily noticed the strange behavior, but didn't ask questions, sensing that something important was worrying her new grandma. "Lily, I need to make some important calls. Can you play in your room while I do?" "I can, Grandma. I'm going to draw more little birds for you." Alone in the living room, Eleanor picked up the phone and dialed the number of the family lawyer, Dr. August Mendez, who had been handling the Vance family's legal affairs for over 20 years. "Dr. Mendez, this is Eleanor Vance. I need to speak with you urgently about the factory and my nephew Declan." "Eleanor, how good to hear your voice. What can I do for you?" "I've discovered serious irregularities in the factory's management. product tampering, threats against employees, falsified documents. I need to know my legal rights and how to protect a child who is being threatened." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Eleanor, those are very serious accusations. Do you have evidence?" "I have documents, photographs, witnesses, Dr. Mendez. The situation is more serious than I can explain over the phone. Can we meet today?" "Of course. Come to my office at 5. And Eleanor, if there are really threats involved, it might be wise to bring the child with you. Don't leave her alone." After hanging up, Eleanor felt slightly relieved. Dr. Mendez was an upstanding and experienced man, someone she could trust completely. But there were still several hours until the meeting, and she needed to ensure Lily was safe. That's when she remembered Sebastian. The loyal employee knew the whole situation and could be an important ally. Eleanor called the factory, hoping Declan wasn't around. "Vance Factory Lab." "Sebastian, this is Mrs. Vance. Can you talk?" "I can, ma'am, Mr. Declan left an hour ago and said he's not coming back today." "Sebastian, I spoke with Declan this morning, and the situation has become much more complicated. He made direct threats against me and the girl. I need your help." "My God, Mrs. Vance, I knew he wouldn't take it quietly if the truth came out. What do you need me to do?" "First, are you safe there? Does he suspect it was you who came to me?" "I don't know, Mom. He asked some strange questions about who had access to the old files, but he didn't mention my name specifically." "Sebastian, I think you should leave the factory before he comes back. And if possible, bring any documents or evidence that are still there." "I've already thought about that, Mrs. Vance. In fact, I have some things stored at home that Rosalind asked me to protect, things I didn't even give you yet because I was scared." "What kind of things?" "Tapes, Mom. Rosalind had recorded conversations with Mr. Declan, including the threats he made against her." Eleanor felt a mix of relief and horror. Audio evidence would be devastating for Declan, but it would also confirm that he was capable of even worse acts than she had imagined. "Sebastian, can you take these tapes to Dr. August Mendez's office on 15th of November Street? I'm meeting him at 5. "I can, Ma'am. And Mrs. Vance, there's one more thing. I found out where Rosalind is." Eleanor's heart stopped. "How?" "I have a cousin who works at a private clinic in a nearby city. Last week when I showed him a picture of Rosalind, he said he's sure he saw her there. She's using another name, but he recognized her face." "Is she sick?" "I don't know, Ma'am. But he said she seemed very scared and nervous, always looking over her shoulder as if she were running from something." "Sebastian, this changes everything. I need to find a way to contact her without putting her in danger." "Leave it to me, Ma'am. I'll ask my cousin to talk to her discreetly to see if she's willing to receive news about her daughter." After arranging the details, Eleanor hung up with her heart racing. Rosalind was alive. Lily could be reunited with her mother. But first, she needed to ensure they were both safe from Declan's threats. It was 4 in the afternoon when Eleanor started getting Lily ready to leave. The girl was excited about the prospect of visiting a lawyer's office, thinking it would be an interesting adventure. "Grandma, why do we need to go talk to the doctor?" "Because sometimes adults need help solving complicated problems, my dear. And Dr. Mendez is a very wise person who can help us." "Is it about my mommy?" The question caught Eleanor off guard. "Why do you ask?" "Because since yesterday you get sad when you think I'm not looking. And this morning there was a man here who was talking about my mom. I heard a little bit before you sent me to play." Eleanor knelt in front of Lily. The girl deserved to know at least part of the truth. "Lily, we've found out some things about where your mother might be, and I'm working on finding a way for you to see each other again." Lily's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of hope. "My mommy is alive. We believe so, dear, but we still need to be sure and find a safe way to bring her back." "I knew it," exclaimed Lily, hugging Eleanor. "I always knew she hadn't gone away forever." When they left the house, Eleanor noticed a dark car parked on the corner with a man in the driver's seat reading a newspaper. As they passed, the man lowered the newspaper and watched them intently. Eleanor quickened her pace, pulling Lily by the hand. "Grandma, why are we walking so fast?" "We're just in a bit of a hurry, dear." Udil. At Dr. Mendez's office, Eleanor finally felt safe. The lawyer was a man in his 60s with grey hair and glasses who exuded confidence and competence. He listened attentively as Eleanor recounted the entire situation, from the discovery of the tampering to Declan's threats. Sebastian arrived shortly after, carrying a folder with additional documents and a small old tape recorder. "Dr. Mendez, these are the tapes Rosalind recorded of her conversations with Declan," Sebastian said, placing the device on the table. As they began to listen to the recordings, everyone in the room was horrified. Declan's voice was clearly recognizable, making explicit threats against Rosalind and her daughter if she revealed the irregularities at the factory. "If you open your mouth about this, I'll make sure you're arrested for theft," Declan's voice said on one of the recordings, "and your daughter will end up in an institution because a mother in jail can't take care of a child." Lily, who was playing quietly in a corner of the office, looked up when she heard the talk about her mother. Eleanor quickly turned off the recorder. "Dr. Mendez, what can we do?" "Eleanor, with this evidence, we can not only prosecute Declan criminally, but also secure protection orders for you. But we need to act quickly. If he really has dangerous connections, as you suspect, the situation could deteriorate very quickly." "And what about Rosalind? Can we bring her back safely?" "First, we need to neutralize Declan's threats. Then yes, we can work to reunite mother and daughter with all the necessary legal protection." At that moment, Dr. Mendez's secretary knocked urgently on the door. "Dr. Mendez, there's a man downstairs asking if Mrs. Vance and the girl are here. He said it's an urgent family matter, but something about him made me uncomfortable." Eleanor and Sebastian looked at each other. Declan had found where they were. "Dr. Mendez, is there a back exit?" Eleanor asked, picking Lily up in her arms. "There is, but first, let's call the police. It's time to make this official." As Dr. Mendez made the call to the authorities, Eleanor looked at Lily, who seemed scared but confident in her new grandmother's arms. The girl had survived so much suffering, and now that there was a real chance of reuniting with her mother, Eleanor would do anything to protect her from the final obstacles that stood between her and happiness. The tension in Dr. Mendez's office was palpable as they waited for the authorities to arrive. Eleanor kept Lily close to her, trying to appear calm, while her heart beat erratically. Through the window, they could see Declan talking to the secretary on the ground floor, his gestures indicating growing irritation. "Dr. Mendez," Eleanor whispered, "how long until the police get here?" "They said 15 minutes, but I'll try to buy some time," the lawyer replied, speaking into the intercom. "Marcia, tell the gentleman I'll be available in a few minutes, that I'm finishing an important call." Sebastian positioned himself near the window, watching the movement on the street. "Mrs. Vance, there are 2 more men outside. I don't think Declan came alone this time." The situation was becoming more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. Lily, sensing the adult's tension, clung to Eleanor's dress. "Grandma, are we in danger?" "No, my dear. The adults are just solving some problems. Soon everything will be fine," Eleanor lied, kissing the girl's forehead. At that moment, Dr. Mendez's phone rang. It was Marcia, the secretary. "Doctor, the man is being very insistent. He said he knows they're here and he's not leaving without talking to his aunt. He's getting agitated. Marcia, keep the doors locked and don't let anyone come up. The police have been called." 10 minutes passed like hours. Eleanor tried to distract Lily with stories about birds and flowers, while Sebastian and Dr. Mendez organized the evidence against Declan to be easily accessible for the authorities. Mrs. Vance, Sebastian said in a low voice. My cousin from the clinic sent me a message. He managed to talk to Rosalind. She's desperate for news about her daughter and wants to come back, but she's afraid of Declan's reprisals. What did she say exactly? That she has more evidence hidden, things I didn't even know existed. Documents that prove not only the tampering at the factory, but also Declan's connections to dangerous people who helped him pressure employees and suppliers. Doctor, Mendez looked up from the evidence he was organizing. What kind of connections? According to her, Declan owed a lot of money to people involved in illegal gambling. To pay off the debts, he started doing favors for them, like using the factory to launder money through fake contracts with non-existent suppliers. The revelation left everyone in silence. The situation was even more complex than they had imagined. It wasn't just about a man with a gambling problem tampering with products. Declan had become involved in a network of illegal activities using the traditional Vance factory as a front. That's why he's so desperate, Eleanor murmured. If the truth comes out, it won't just be his reputation at stake. He could end up in prison and still owe money to dangerous people. At that moment, they heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Declan had managed to get past the secretary and was coming up towards the office. Dr. Mendez, is it locked? Eleanor asked, getting up with Lily in her arms. Before the lawyer could answer, loud bangs echoed on the door. Aunt Eleanor, I know you're in there. We need to talk now. I'm not opening, Declan. Go away. Auntie, you don't understand what you're doing. You're putting all of us in danger, including the girl. Dr. Mendez approached the door. Mr. Martin, I am Dr. August Mendez, your family's lawyer. I suggest you leave immediately. The authorities have been called. There was a pause. Then Declan's voice sounded even more agitated. Doctor Mendez, you don't know what a mess you're getting into. There are people interested in this situation who will not accept legal interference. Are you threatening me, young man? I'm warning you, my aunt and this girl are safe as long as I can control the situation, but if this becomes a police case... At that moment, the sound of sirens echoed down the street. The police had finally arrived. Declan, get out of there now, Eleanor shouted. It's over. They heard footsteps running down the stairs, followed by loud voices on the ground floor. Dr. Mendez cautiously opened the door and saw 2 police officers coming up the stairs. Dr. Mendez, we received your call about threats and coercion. Yes, officer. The people being threatened are here with me, and we have substantial evidence against the accused. Sergeant Miller, a middle-aged man with a serious expression, entered the office, followed by his partner. Where is the accused now? He just ran out, Sebastian replied, but he had other men waiting outside. We already have a team surrounding the building. No one leaves without identification. The sergeant turned to Eleanor. Ma'am, I need you to tell me exactly what happened. Over the next 2 hours, Eleanor recounted the entire story, from Rosalind's disappearance to Declan's threats. The evidence was presented. Documents, photographs, and especially the recordings that made clear the pattern of threats and coercion. It's a complex case, the sergeant said after examining everything. We'll need time to investigate fully, but we already have enough to issue search and seizure warrants for the factory and the accused's residence. And our safety? Eleanor asked, looking at Lily, who had fallen asleep in her arms during the whole process. We will maintain surveillance at your residence for the next 48 hours while we arrest Mr. Martin and investigate his connections. But I must warn you, ma'am, if he really has ties to criminal elements, the situation could become complicated. Dr. Mendez intervened. Sergeant, we have information that the child's mother is alive and hiding in a nearby city. She has additional evidence that could be crucial to the case. We will contact the authorities there to locate her and ensure her protection as well. When they finally left the office, it was already dark. A police car escorted them to Eleanor's house, where two officers would stand guard until the situation was resolved. "Grandma, why are there police at our house?" Lily asked, finally waking up when they got home. "It's just a precaution, my dear, to make sure we stay safe while we solve your mommy's problems. Is my mommy coming back soon?" Eleanor looked at the girl, her big eyes full of hope, and felt her heart ache. After everything they had been through, she didn't want to make promises she might not be able to keep. "We're doing everything we can to bring her back, Lily. The right people know the truth now, and that's very important." That night, while Lily slept soundly for the first time in days, Eleanor received a call from Sebastian. "Mrs. Vance, my cousin managed to have a longer talk with Rosalind. She really wants to talk to you, but she's afraid it's a trap from Declan." "What does she need to feel safe?" "She said she'll only agree to talk if it's officially through the police, with guarantees of protection. And there's one more important thing she revealed." "What?" Rosalind said she has a recording of a conversation between Declan and the men he owes money to. In that recording, they discuss not only the illegal business at the factory, but also talk about solving the problem of the inconvenient employee definitively. Eleanor felt a chill in her stomach. Were they planning to hurt Rosalind? "Worse than that, ma'am. From what she understood, they were discussing ways to make her disappear permanently in a way that would look accidental." The magnitude of the danger Rosalind had faced, and that they now also faced, became clear to Eleanor. It wasn't just blackmail and coercion. There were people willing to go to extreme lengths to protect their interests. "Sebastian, I need to talk to Sergeant Miller first thing in the morning. This information changes everything. Mrs. Vance, are you sure you want to continue with this? These people won't stop until they get what they want." Eleanor looked towards the room where Lily was sleeping peacefully, trusting that the adults around her would keep her safe. "I'm sure, Sebastian. This girl deserves to have her mother back, and she deserves to grow up in a world where people like Declan can't threaten innocent families. We're going to see this through, no matter what it costs." The next morning, the true dimension of what they were facing would become clear, and Eleanor would discover that her determination to protect Lily would be tested in ways she never imagined possible. Dawn brought with it disturbing news. Sergeant Miller called Eleanor at 7 in the morning, his voice heavy with concern. "Mrs. Vance, we have a problem. Declan was not found at his residence last night. The house was empty, as if he had left in a hurry, and the factory was broken into during the night." Eleanor's stomach sank. Broken into? Someone destroyed the lab and the administrative office. They burned many documents, took computers. It seems they were looking for specific evidence. "Sergeant, does this mean they know we're investigating?" "It means we're dealing with people who are more organized than we initially thought, Mrs. Vance, I'll be direct. We need to move you and the girl to a safer location until we can locate everyone involved." Lily was having breakfast in the kitchen when Eleanor returned from the call. The girl immediately noticed her adoptive grandmother's worried expression. "Did something bad happen?" she asked in her small voice. "Nothing you need to worry about, my dear. But we might have to take a little trip for a few days." "Where to?" "To a place where we'll be very safe while your mommy's problems are being resolved." 2 hours later, Eleanor and Lily were in a simple house on the outskirts of a neighboring town, a rural property the police used to protect witnesses in sensitive cases. The move had been quick and discreet, but necessary after the information Sebastian had relayed about Rosalind's recordings. "Mrs. Vance," said Agent Carla Fisher, a 35-year-old woman assigned to their security, "we know it's hard to be taken from your home, but it's temporary. Meanwhile, our team in the other city is working to locate the girl's mother." "How long do you think it will take?" It depends on whether we can get the evidence she has. If there really is a recording of what the suspect and his associates were planning, it will change the case completely. Lily was exploring the small but cozy house, especially delighted with the large yard where chickens pecked freely and there was a well-tended vegetable garden. "Grandma Eleanor, can I give corn to the chickens?" "Of course, my dear, but don't wander away from the house." While Lily played in the yard under Agent Fisher's watchful eyes, Eleanor received a call from Dr. Mendez. "Eleanor, I have news about the factory investigation. They found evidence that the damage caused by Declan's tampering is much greater than we imagined." "What do you mean?" "He wasn't just swapping ingredients to pocket the difference. He was using the factory for much more complex money laundering schemes. Fake contracts with non-existent suppliers, fraudulent invoices, suspicious bank transfers." "Dr. Mendez, does this mean the factory could close?" "It's a real possibility, Eleanor. The financial damages are substantial, and the brand's reputation has been severely compromised. But there's a way to save the situation." "How?" "If we can prove you had no knowledge of Declan's illicit activities, and if we cooperate fully with the investigation, we can negotiate a restructuring of the company, but it will be a long and painful process." Eleanor looked out the window at Lily, who was telling stories to the chickens as if they were her friends. The girl had lost so much in her life that she deserved stability and security. But now, the legacy of 3 generations of the Vance family was threatened because of Declan's actions. "Dr. Mendez, do whatever is necessary to save the factory, not just for the employees' jobs, but because it's all I can leave as an inheritance for Lily when she grows up." "Eleanor, have you decided about the girl's custody?" "Yes. When we find Rosalind, I'm going to make a legal proposal to adopt her. Not as a substitute for her real mother, but as a grandmother who loves her and wants to give her every opportunity she deserves." That afternoon, Agent Fisher received a call that changed everything. It was from the police department in the city where Rosalind was. "Agent Fisher, this is Chief Sanders. We've located Rosalind Fisher. She's physically fine, but very emotionally shaken, and we've confirmed she has crucial evidence for the case." "What kind of evidence?" "Indeed, to an audio recording of about 40 minutes where Declan Martin and 2 other men discuss in detail how to force problematic employees to accept transfers to other cities, or, in extreme cases, how to make them unavailable to cause trouble." Eleanor, who was listening to the conversation, felt her legs go weak. The coldness with which Declan had planned to destroy human lives to protect his schemes was even worse than she had imagined. "When can we talk to Rosalind?" Eleanor asked. "She insists on speaking with her daughter first. She said she needs to be sure the girl is okay before she does anything." "How can we arrange that safely?" "A supervised video conference, tomorrow morning if you agree." That night, Eleanor had one of the most difficult conversations of her life with Lily. The girl was lying in the simple bed in the room they shared, hugging a rag doll that Agent Fisher had found for her. "Lily, tomorrow you'll be able to talk to your mother." The girl sat up in bed immediately, her eyes shining with a mixture of joy and fear. "Will she be able to see me?" "She will. Through a special television, you'll be able to see and talk to each other. And then will she come and get me?" Eleanor took a deep breath. "Lily, your mother loves you very much, but the situation is still complicated. She might need to stay in the safe place where she is for a little longer. And I'll have to stay here away from her?" "Not necessarily. There are many possibilities being discussed. But the important thing is that you'll be able to talk and see each other again." "Grandma Eleanor, if my mommy comes back, will you still be my grandma?" The question touched Eleanor's heart deeply. "If your mother agrees, and if you want, I would love to continue being part of your life forever. I want that. I want to have my mommy and my grandma. Is it possible to have both? Of course it's possible, my dear. Families can be big and full of love. The next morning, the video conference was set up at the local police station with Eleanor, Lily, Agent Fisher, and a child psychologist present to support the girl during the emotional encounter. When Rosalind's image appeared on the screen, Lily was silent for several seconds, simply looking at the woman she hadn't seen in so many months. "My little princess," Rosalind said, tears streaming down her face. "How you've grown! Mommy, I knew you would come back. I always knew. Mommy never stopped thinking about you for a single second. I'm okay, I'm safe, and soon we'll be together again. Mommy, Grandma Eleanor took very good care of me. She gives me yummy food, tells me stories, and even taught me how to make sweets." Rosalind looked at Eleanor through the screen, and the two women understood each other without words. A mother thanking another for having her daughter protected and loved, and a grandmother of the heart promising she would always be part of that family. "Lily, Mommy needs to stay where she is for a few more days until the problems are resolved. But you can stay with Grandma Eleanor, who I know loves you very much. I love her too, Mommy. And when you come back, will we all live together?" Rosalind and Eleanor looked at each other again. It was a possibility they had both considered, but that still needed to be discussed properly. "We'll see how we can organize our family in the best way possible, my dear," Rosalind said. "The important thing is that now we know we're all okay, and we love each other very much." After the conversation, Lily was radiant, but also emotionally exhausted. She slept soundly all afternoon, while Eleanor and Agent Fisher received updates on the investigation. "Mrs. Vance, with the new evidence provided by Rosalind, we've managed to identify the others involved in the scheme. Arrest warrants have been issued, and we expect everyone to be captured within the next 48 hours. And after that, you can go back home and start the process of rebuilding your lives. But Mrs. Vance, the factory, it's going to be a very big challenge to save it." Eleanor looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully, and felt a renewed determination grow in her chest. The girl had faced so many losses and could still smile, trust, and love unconditionally. If a 4-year-old child could be so strong, a 70-year-old woman could certainly find the strength to rebuild the family legacy and ensure a secure future for her new granddaughter of the heart. "Agent Fisher, we'll do whatever it takes. This girl deserves to have a complete family and a bright future, and I will ensure she has both." 3 days after the video conference, Eleanor received the call that would change everything once again. It was Sergeant Miller, his voice a mix of relief and concern. "Mrs. Vance, we have good news and bad news. The good news is we managed to arrest 2 of the men involved with Declan. The bad news is that he is still at large, and there are indications he may have left the region." "Does that mean we're still in danger?" "As a precaution, yes. But it also means you can return home with a police escort. We discovered something important in the documents seized from Declan's associates." "What did you discover?" "He was planning to sell the factory to a front company linked to the money laundering schemes. The contract was almost ready, and if it had been finalized, you would have completely lost control of the family business." Eleanor felt as if she had been punched. "He was going to sell the factory without my consent?" "Apparently. He had falsified documents giving him full power over business decisions, claiming you were no longer mentally fit to manage the business." The betrayal was even deeper than Eleanor had imagined. Declan wasn't just stealing from the company. He was trying to steal the company itself from her, using her age as a pretext to question her competence. "Sergeant, what does this mean for the factory's legal situation?" Since the documents were fraudulent, the sale has no legal validity, but you're going to need very good lawyers to undo the financial mess he created. That afternoon, back at the house in Oak Haven under police escort, Eleanor faced a devastating reality. The factory was sealed by the authorities. The employees had been temporarily laid off, and rumors spread by Declan about her senility were circulating through the town. Lily, who had been excited to return home, quickly realized something was very wrong. "Grandma, why are there so many strange people on our street? And why are the neighbors looking at us in a weird way?" Sometimes when adults do wrong things, it affects other people too, but we're going to fix everything, my dear. Dr. Mendez arrived late in the afternoon with a grim expression and a folder full of legal documents. "Eleanor, the situation is more complicated than we thought. Declan managed to convince several suppliers and customers that you were having mental health problems and that he was just protecting the family business. But that's a lie." "I know that, you know that, but he was very convincing. We have depositions from people who swear they noticed signs of mental confusion in you in recent months." Eleanor sat down heavily in the armchair. "Dr. Mendez, how are we going to prove this is all a lie?" "We'll request an independent psychiatric evaluation to attest to your full mental capacity. But Eleanor, there's something else I need to tell you." "What else could have happened?" "Sebastian came to see me today. He and other employees want to testify in your favor, but they're scared. Apparently, Declan spread threats before he fled, saying that anyone who testified against him would face serious consequences. My God, he destroyed everything: the company, the family's reputation, the employees' safety." At that moment, Lily appeared in the room carrying a drawing she had made during the afternoon. "Grandma Eleanor, I made a drawing of our happy family." The drawing showed 3 figures holding hands in front of a colorful house: Eleanor, Lily, and a woman who clearly represented Rosalind. Around them were flowers, birds, and even a building that could be the candy factory. "It's beautiful, my dear," Eleanor said, hugging the girl and trying not to cry in front of her. "When Mommy comes to live with us, it will be just like this," Lily said, with the innocent confidence that only children possess. Dr. Mendez looked at the drawing and then at Eleanor. "You know, Eleanor, maybe this drawing is exactly what we need to remind us of what really matters." "What do you mean?" "You have a second chance to form a real family with this girl and her mother. Regardless of what happens to the factory, that's something Declan can never destroy." 2 hours later, Eleanor received an unexpected call. It was Rosalind, calling from the police station in the other city. "Mrs. Vance, I heard you're back home. How is Lily?" "She's fine, dear, eager to see you in person, but fine." "Mrs. Vance, I need to tell you something important. I managed to remember where Declan hid some documents that could help save the factory." "What do you mean?" "Before I left town, I saw him put some papers in a secret drawer in his office. Papers that looked very important, different from the other company documents. Do you think they're still there? If the police haven't found them yet, it's likely the drawer is well hidden behind a fake painting on the wall." Eleanor immediately called Sergeant Miller, who promised to check on the information the next day. But that night, something unexpected happened. Around 2 in the morning, Eleanor woke up to the sound of breaking glass. Lily was sleeping soundly beside her, but she got up cautiously and looked out the window. A dark figure was moving around in the factory office, which was on the ground floor of the building attached to the house. The person was carrying a flashlight and was clearly looking for something specific. Eleanor immediately called the emergency number the sergeant had left, but as she spoke, the figure disappeared into the shadows. 15 minutes later, 2 police officers arrived and found evidence that someone had indeed broken into the office. A drawer behind the painting on the wall had been forced open and was empty. "Whoever did this knew exactly where to look," one of the officers said. They didn't touch anything else, just this specific drawer. The next morning, Sergeant Miller arrived with a worried expression. "Mrs. Vance, we believe it was Declan who broke into the office last night. This means he's still in the area and was desperate to retrieve some specific documents. What documents would be so important? Probably contracts or evidence that could implicate other people besides the ones we've already arrested. Or maybe documents that would prove his innocence regarding the false accusations about your mental capacity." Dr. Mendez, who had arrived with the sergeant, made a disturbing observation. If Declan was desperate enough to come back and risk being arrested, those documents must contain information that could completely destroy his schemes or protect him from even worse consequences. That afternoon, Lily was playing in the yard when she noticed a man watching the house from across the street. She ran inside, scared. "Grandma Eleanor, there's a weird man looking at our house." Eleanor looked out the window and immediately recognized the silhouette. It was Declan, thinner and with a disheveled appearance, but it was definitely him. "Lily, go to your room and stay there until I say you can come out," Eleanor said, picking up the phone to call the police. But when she looked out the window again, Declan had disappeared. For the rest of the day, the tension in the house was palpable. Police made constant patrols but found no trace of Declan. It was as if he were a ghost, appearing and disappearing as he pleased. At night, as she put Lily to bed, Eleanor tried to maintain a sense of normalcy. "Grandma, why was that man spying on us?" "Sometimes people who have done wrong things get nervous and do even more wrong things. But don't worry, we're protected." "When is my mommy coming home?" "Soon, my dear, very soon." But deep down, Eleanor wondered if Rosalind would really be safe coming back to Oakhaven while Declan was still on the loose, and especially if they could ever rebuild a normal life after so much destruction and trauma. What she didn't know was that the next morning, an unexpected discovery would change everything once again, revealing secrets about her own family that would make the situation even more complex and emotionally devastating. That night, Declan was hiding in a cheap boarding house on the outskirts of town, planning his next move. He had recovered some important documents, but not all that he needed, and he knew he was running out of time and options. His last card would be the riskiest of all, and it would involve using the one thing that still had value to the people chasing him, information that could destroy much more than just his own reputation. The morning came with a call Eleanor never expected to receive. It was Sebastian, his voice trembling with nervousness and something that sounded like hope. "Mrs. Vance, I need to see you urgently. I discovered something about our family's history that will change everything you think about this case." "Sebastian, what do you mean?" "I can't talk over the phone, but it has to do with your late husband Arthur and some documents he left with me before he passed. Documents that explain a lot about why Declan became who he is." An hour later, Sebastian was sitting in Eleanor's kitchen while Lily played in the yard under the supervision of the officer on duty. He carried an old shoebox tied with string, which he had brought hidden under his coat. "Mrs. Vance, Mr. Vance gave me this shortly before he got very sick. He said that if you ever had serious problems with someone in the family, especially with Declan, I should give you this box." "Arthur knew Declan could cause trouble?" "He did, ma'am, and much more than that." Sebastian carefully opened the box. Mr. Vance discovered that Declan is not his brother's legitimate son. Eleanor felt the world spin around her. "What do you mean?" "It's all here, ma'am, documents, letters, even a DNA test that Mr. Vance had done in secret." Sebastian took a yellowed folder from the box. "Declan is the son of an extramarital affair your brother-in-law had, but he was registered as a legitimate son to avoid a family scandal." "Sebastian, that doesn't make sense. If Arthur knew this, why did he never tell me?" "Because his brother begged him to keep it a secret. He said Declan was just a child and wasn't to blame for his parents' mistakes, but Mr. Vance suspected that one day this could be important. Eleanor examined the documents with trembling hands. There were original birth certificates, letters between the brothers, and most importantly, a paternity test that proved Declan was not biologically the son of the man who had raised him. Sebastian, why would this be important now? Because according to inheritance laws, Declan has no automatic rights to the family business. He was only included in the will because everyone believed he was the legitimate son. If this comes to light, he loses any legal claim to the factory, Eleanor completed, the enormity of the revelation starting to make sense. Exactly, ma'am. And there's more. Mr. Vance discovered that Declan's biological mother had other children, children who grew up never knowing of his existence, children who technically would have more rights to any inheritance from the real father than Declan himself. At that moment, Lily ran into the kitchen, interrupting the conversation. "Grandma Eleanor, the policeman said a pretty lady is coming here in a car. She looks like someone I know." Eleanor looked out the window and saw a police car approaching. In the passenger seat, a dark-haired woman waved shyly. It was Rosalind. "Mommy!" Lily screamed, running to the door. The reunion was both emotional and painful. Rosalind got out of the car with tears in her eyes, knelt on the sidewalk, and opened her arms to receive Lily, who ran into her embrace as if the last few months of separation had been just a bad dream. "My princess, my beautiful girl," Rosalind cried, hugging her daughter tightly. "Mommy will never leave you again." "I knew you would come back. I always knew," Lily said between tears of joy. Eleanor watched the scene with a heart both broken and filled with happiness. That girl was finally back in her real mother's arms, but it also meant that her own life would become lonely again. Rosalind approached Eleanor, still holding Lily in her arms. "Mrs. Vance, I have no words to thank you for what you did for my daughter. She told me on the video call that you took care of her as if she were your own granddaughter. It was a privilege, dear. Lily brought light into my life when I needed it most." "Mrs. Vance," Rosalind said hesitantly, "I talked a lot with the police psychologists about our situation. I know you've grown attached to Lily, and she has clearly grown attached to you too. It's natural, Rosalind, but now you are reunited, and that's what matters. Actually," Rosalind continued, "I'd like to propose something, if you agree. What if the three of us became a family? Lily told me she wants to have both her mommy and her grandma Eleanor in her life." Eleanor looked at the two, mother and daughter reunited, and felt an inexplicable emotion take over her chest. "Rosalind, are you sure? It would be a very unusual arrangement." "Mrs. Vance, you saved my daughter when I couldn't. You gave me the most precious gift there is, knowing that the person I love most in the world was safe and loved. If you accept, I would like us to be an unconventional but true family." Lily looked between the two women. "Does this mean I'll have a mommy and a grandma forever?" "If that's what we all want, yes," Eleanor said, hugging them both. That afternoon, as Rosalind settled back into the house and learned the details of everything that had happened, Sebastian revealed more information from Arthur's box. "Mrs. Vance, there's something else you need to know. Your husband found out that Declan had known the truth about his paternity for at least 5 years. How did he find out? Apparently, Declan hired a private investigator to check on inheritance information when he started having financial problems. That's when he discovered he wasn't the legitimate son and that his rights to the company could be challenged. That explains why he started stealing from the factory," said Rosalind, who was listening to the conversation. "He knew he had no legal right to what he was taking, so he decided to take as much as possible before anyone found out the truth. And it also explains why he was so desperate to have me legally incapacitated, Eleanor added. If I were declared mentally incompetent, he could take full control before anyone questioned his legitimacy. At that moment, the phone rang. It was Sergeant Miller. Mrs. Vance, we have important news. We've located Declan. He's at a boarding house on the outskirts of town, but he's not alone. What do you mean? He's made contact with some of the men we haven't been able to arrest yet. They're planning something for tonight, possibly an attempt to recover documents or evidence that could incriminate them. What kind of attempt? We don't know for sure, but we intercepted communications indicating they believe you have information that could completely destroy them. Eleanor looked at Arthur's box of documents and realized she might have inadvertently become the main target of very dangerous people. Sergeant, we need additional protection. We've discovered information that complicates the situation even further. What kind of information? Eleanor explained about the documents revealing Declan's false paternity and its legal implications. On the other end of the line, there was a prolonged silence. Mrs. Vance, this changes the case completely. If Declan has no legitimate rights to the company, many of the contracts and transactions he made could be automatically voided. What does that mean? It means he and his associates could lose millions in illegal investments, and that makes them much more dangerous than we thought. That night, the house was under heavy police surveillance. Rosalind had put Lily to bed, telling her stories of free birds and brave princesses, while Eleanor organized all the documents to hand over to the authorities the next morning. Mrs. Vance, Rosalind said, I'm very afraid of what might happen when Declan finds out about these documents. So am I, dear. But we can't live in fear forever. Lily deserves to grow up in peace, and the factory employees deserve their jobs back. You're right. And if we can prove Declan had no legal right to the company, maybe we can rebuild everything he destroyed. That night, as the house slept under police protection, none of them knew that the discovery of Arthur's documents had sealed the fate of everyone involved. The next morning, the truth would come out in a way none of them could have foreseen, and Declan would make his last and most desperate move to try to save himself, even if it meant completely destroying the people he once considered family. The final battle was about to begin, and the future of 3 generations of the Vance family would be decided in the next 24 hours. Dawn brought with it an unusual amount of activity on the street where Eleanor's house stood. Official cars, lawyers, and even some local journalists who had found out about the scandal at the traditional Vance factory were gathered outside. Lily woke up startled by the noise and ran to the room of Eleanor and Rosalind, who had spent the night talking about future plans and trying to process everything that had happened. "Mummy, Grandma, why are there so many people outside?" the girl asked, climbing into bed between the 2 women. "Sometimes, when important things happen, people get curious," Rosalind explained, hugging her daughter. "But don't worry, we're safe here." Dr. Mendez arrived at 8 in the morning with an expression that mixed excitement and concern. He brought a folder full of documents and the news that the legal situation had become even more complex overnight. "Eleanor, the documents Sebastian brought yesterday caused an earthquake in the legal community. We already have 3 different law firms questioning the validity of all contracts Declan signed in the last 5 years. Is that good or bad for us?" Eleanor asked. "It's excellent for recovering the factory, but it has created a new problem. Declan is now not only on the run from the police for tampering and threats, he's on the run from people who lost a lot of money because of the fraudulent contracts he signed." Rosalind, who was serving breakfast to Lily, stopped what she was doing. "Dr. Mendez, does that mean he's even more desperate?" "Exactly. And desperate people make extreme decisions." At that moment, Sergeant Miller arrived, accompanied by 2 other officers and a woman in a suit Eleanor didn't know. Mrs. Vance, this is Detective Maria Wallace, a specialist in financial crimes. She came from the state capital, especially for this case. The detective was a woman in her 40s, with her hair in a neat bun and a determined look. She greeted everyone and got straight to the point. Mrs. Vance, based on the evidence you've provided, we've discovered that this case is much bigger than a simple corporate fraud. Declan Martin was at the center of a money laundering network involving at least 6 companies in the southern part of the state. "My God," Eleanor whispered, "and there's more. The documents about his paternity not only invalidate his rights to your company, but also expose fraudulent contracts he made in the Vance family name with companies linked to organized crime." Lily, who was playing silently with her dolls in the corner of the room, suddenly lifted her head. "Grandma Eleanor, that man from yesterday is outside again." Everyone rushed to the window. Across the street, partially hidden behind a car, Declan was watching the house, but this time he wasn't alone. 2 men in dark glasses were with him. "Sergeant, he brought reinforcements," Eleanor said, pulling Lily away from the window. "Detective, we need to act now," Sergeant Miller said into his radio. "We have the main suspect and possible accomplices in an observation position. Approach authorized. Team 2, circle from the right, Team 3 from the left." Within minutes, a police operation was underway right in front of the house. Eleanor, Rosalind and Lily took shelter in the back room, while they listened to police commands and the sound of moving cars. "Grandma, are they arresting the bad man?" Lily asked, clinging to Eleanor's hand. "They're trying, my dear, so he can't scare anyone anymore." 15 minutes later, Sergeant Miller knocked on the bedroom door. "You can come out. We managed to arrest the 2 men who were with Declan, but he escaped on foot through the backyards of the neighboring houses." "He's still loose?" Rosalind asked, worried. "For now, yes, but he can't have gone far. The whole town is being patrolled." Detective Wallace joined the group with important news. "Mrs. Vance, the men we arrested have provided valuable information in exchange for a plea deal. Declan has a specific plan for today." "What kind of plan?" "He intends to break into the factory and completely destroy the lab and the remaining files. He believes that if he eliminates all physical evidence, he can still negotiate his freedom with the criminals he owes money to." "But the factory is sealed and under police surveillance," said Dr. Mendez. "Declan knows about underground passages that connect the factory to neighboring buildings. Passages that were built during World War II and that few people know exist." Eleanor vaguely remembered stories her late husband used to tell about old tunnels in Oakhaven's central area, but she had never imagined they ran under the factory. "Detective, what can we do?" "We'll use this information to set a trap. If Declan really tries to break into the factory, we'll be waiting for him." That afternoon, as the police operation was being prepared, Eleanor received an unexpected call. It was an unknown female voice, but it sounded familiar somehow. "Mrs. Eleanor Vance?" "Yes, who is this?" "My name is Laura Fisher. I'm Rosalind's sister and Lily's aunt. I read about everything that happened in the newspaper and I came from out of state to help." Eleanor was silent for a moment. Rosalind had never mentioned having sisters. "Rosalind is here. Would you like to speak with her?" "Actually, Mrs. Vance, I need to talk to you first. It's about something Rosalind doesn't know, but that might be important to resolve this situation." "What kind of thing?" "I'd rather not talk over the phone. Can I come to your house?" Eleanor hesitated, but something in the woman's voice sounded sincere and desperate. "You can come, but be aware there is a police presence in the area for security reasons." An hour later, a woman of about 30, with features that vaguely resembled Rosalind's, was sitting in Eleanor's living room. Laura had lighter hair than her sister and a tougher expression, but there was an undeniable resemblance between them. "Rosalind really doesn't know you exist?" Eleanor asked. We're half-sisters. We grew up apart after our parents separated when she was very young, but I've always followed her life from a distance. And why did you never get in touch? Because our mother made me swear I would never reveal where Rosalind was. Our family has a complicated history with dangerous people, and our mother believed it was safer for us to keep our distance. Rosalind, who was in the yard with Lily, entered the house at that moment and stopped abruptly upon seeing the stranger. "Rosalind," Eleanor said carefully, "this is Laura. She says she's your sister." The meeting between the two sisters was emotionally charged. Rosalind initially showed distrust, but as Laura shared specific childhood memories and showed old photographs, the reality of the situation became undeniable. "Laura, why did you come now?" Rosalind asked, still processing the shock of discovering she had a living sister. "Because I know who Declan Martin is, Rosalind, and I know why he's so desperate." "How do you know who he is?" "Because he sought me out 6 months ago when he was investigating your life. Declan found out you had family, and he tried to use me to find you when you disappeared." The revelation left everyone in silence. Declan had not only threatened Rosalind and forged documents against her, but he had also tried to manipulate her own family to find her. "Laura, what did he want from you?" Eleanor asked. "Information about where Rosalind might be hiding. He offered money, then made threats. But I didn't know where she was, so I couldn't help him even if I wanted to." "And why didn't you contact Rosalind sooner to warn her?" "Because he said if I made any contact with her, both she and her daughter would suffer the consequences." At that moment, Lily ran into the room. "Mommy, Grandma, can I meet the new aunt? She looks like Mommy." The tense moment was broken by the child's innocence. Laura knelt to be at Lily's level. "Hi, Lily. I'm your Mommy's sister. That makes me your Aunt Laura." "I have a real aunt. That's so cool. Now my family is even bigger." In the afternoon, as emotions settled, Laura revealed the most important information she had brought. "Rosalind, Declan isn't just running from the police. He's being hunted by very dangerous people who lost money because of his schemes. And these people believe the entire Vance family has hidden money that can compensate for their losses." "What hidden money?" Eleanor asked. "They don't know there is no hidden money. They believe the factory was just a front for much larger operations and that you are pretending to be victims." The situation had become even more dangerous. Not only was Declan threatening them, but also criminals who believed they had access to fortunes that didn't exist. "Laura, how can we prove we don't have hidden money?" Rosalind asked. "I don't know if it's possible to prove a negative to people who don't want to believe, but I know that as long as Declan is alive and free, you will never be completely safe." That night, as the newly expanded family tried to process all the day's revelations, a call changed everything once more. It was Detective Wallace. "Mrs. Vance, Declan has made contact. He wants to negotiate." "Negotiate what?" "He said he has information that could lead to the arrest of the real heads of the criminal organization. In return, he wants a guarantee of protection and a reduced sentence. And you're going to accept? Depending on the information he offers, we may have no choice. But Mrs. Vance, there's one condition he has imposed." "What condition?" "He wants to speak with you and Rosalind in person before he gives up the information. He says he needs to settle accounts with the family before cooperating with justice." The final confrontation between Declan and the women he had tried to destroy was approaching, and no one knew how this last conversation might end. The meeting was set for the next morning at the police station, under maximum security. Eleanor had spent the entire night unable to sleep, imagining what Declan could possibly want to say after everything he had done. Rosalind was equally nervous, but determined to confront the man who had destroyed her life and forced her separation from her daughter. Lily would stay with Laura during the meeting, in a safe house the police had prepared. The girl had quickly adapted to her newfound aunt's presence, and her ability to find joy in small things continued to surprise everyone around her. "Grandma Eleanor," Lily said, before leaving with Laura, "when you finish talking to the bad man, will our family be together forever?" "We hope so, my dear," Eleanor replied, hugging the girl. "We hope that after today we can live in peace." At the station, Declan looked like a dark version of the man Eleanor had known. Thinner, with an unshaven face and tired red eyes, he was handcuffed and flanked by two police officers. When Eleanor and Rosalind entered the interrogation room, he looked at them with a mixture of resentment and something that might have been regret. "Aunt Eleanor," he said, his voice hoarse, "thank you for agreeing to see me." "Declan, after everything you've done, it's hard to understand why I should still consider you family," Eleanor replied, keeping her voice firm. "And you must be the famous Rosalind," he said, turning to her. "The employee who destroyed my life." "I destroyed your life?" Rosalind replied, her voice filled with disbelief. "You threatened an innocent child, forged documents, nearly scared me to death, and you still think you're the victim in this story." Declan looked down for a moment. "You don't understand the pressure I was under, the debts, the threats, the discovery about my paternity." "Declan," Eleanor interrupted, "we found the documents Arthur kept. We know you've known the truth about your paternity for years. That doesn't justify anything you've done." "Yes, it does," Declan exploded, momentarily losing control. "Do you think it's easy to find out your whole life has been a lie, that you have no legal right to anything you always believed was yours?" Detective Wallace, who had been observing silently until then, spoke up. "Mr. Martin, these ladies came here because you said you have important information. If you want to make a deal, you need to start talking." Declan took a deep breath, and to everyone's surprise, his next words completely changed the direction of the conversation. "Aunt Eleanor, you think you've discovered everything about our family, but there's one thing nobody knows, one thing that will explain why I became so desperate." "What are you talking about?" "About Lily, about who her real father is." The silence in the room was deafening. Rosalind turned pale and gripped her chair. "Declan, stop with these lies," she said, her voice trembling. "It's not a lie, Rosalind. Lily's father isn't some boyfriend you had years ago. It's my older brother, Richard Vance." Eleanor felt as if the floor had opened up beneath her feet. "That's impossible. Richard never told me about any relationship." "Because he didn't know," Declan continued, speaking quickly now. "Richard had a brief affair with Rosalind 5 years ago when she first started working at the factory. She never told him about the pregnancy because he was married and had children." Rosalind was crying silently. "How did you find this out?" "Because when I started investigating you to try and find you, I hired an investigator who did a DNA test with materials you left at the factory. We discovered that Lily has a direct kinship with the Vance family." The revelation hit Eleanor like a tsunami. Lily was not just a girl she had taken in out of charity. She was her true, biological granddaughter. "Declan," the detective said, "are you saying the child is Mrs. Vance's legitimate granddaughter?" "Exactly. And that changes everything about the family's inheritance rights. If Lily is Richard's daughter, she has rights to the company that even I never had, even when they thought I was the legitimate son." Eleanor looked at Rosalind, who was visibly in shock. "Rosalind, is it true?" I was never sure," she whispered. "Richard and I. It was just a few times, and he said he couldn't leave his family for me. When I found out I was pregnant, he had already moved to another state with his wife. I thought it would be better not to complicate his life." "But that means Lily is," Eleanor began. "Is your real granddaughter," Declan finished. "And that's why I was so desperate. I found out that regardless of the documents about my false paternity, there was a child in the family who had real, legitimate rights to everything. The detective jotted down notes quickly. Mr. Martin, even if this is true, it doesn't justify your crimes. I know that now, but at the time it felt like my world was collapsing. I found out I wasn't a legitimate son, that I had huge debts to dangerous people, and that there was a child who could challenge any right I thought I had. So you decided to destroy an innocent employee's life and threaten a 4-year-old child, Rosalind said, her voice filled with anger and pain. I made terrible mistakes, but I want to make amends. The information I have on the criminal organization is real. I can give you names, locations, entire financial schemes. Eleanor was trying to process the enormity of the revelation. Lily was her biological granddaughter. The girl who had come into her life to save a lady from a snake was in fact part of her own family. Detective, Eleanor said, if this is true, what does it mean for the legal situation? It means that Lily has legal rights to the family business, but also that you can officially act as a legal family. If you want to formally adopt the girl, it will be much simpler. 2 hours later, Eleanor and Rosalind left the police station emotionally exhausted, but with the promise that the case was heading towards a conclusion. Declan had provided information that would lead to the arrest of at least 12 people involved in the money laundering schemes, and in return, he would receive a reduced sentence and protection. When they arrived at the safe house where Lily was with Laura, the girl ran to embrace them. Grandma, Eleanor, Mommy, how was the talk with the bad man? It was revealing, my dear, Eleanor said, picking the girl up in her arms. We discovered something very important about our family. What did you discover? Eleanor looked at Rosalind, who nodded encouragingly. We discovered that you're not just the granddaughter of my heart, Lily. You're my true blood granddaughter. Lily was quiet for a moment, processing the information with the seriousness only children can muster. Does that mean I always truly belong to you both? Always, Rosalind said, hugging her daughter along with Eleanor. And it means our family is even more special than we thought, Eleanor added. 6 months later, the Vance factory had been completely restructured and reopened under new management. Eleanor resumed operational control, but this time with Rosalind as general manager and Laura handling the human resources department. Lily attended a private school in Oakhaven and spent her afternoons at the factory, where all the employees knew her as the little princess of sweets. Declan was serving his sentence in a medium security prison, cooperating with investigations and attending rehabilitation programs. Surprisingly, he had written a letter asking the family for forgiveness and expressing genuine remorse for his actions. The revelation about Lily's paternity had been confirmed by DNA tests, and Richard Vance, contacted in his new city, had agreed to meet his daughter and contribute to her upbringing, while respecting the family arrangement that was already established. At Lily's 5th birthday party, held in the backyard of the house where it all began, 3 generations of Vance women gathered around the dessert table. Eleanor, now officially a grandmother, Rosalind, who had resumed her career and found peace, Laura, who had discovered a family she never knew she had, and Lily, who had turned a family tragedy into a story of love and redemption. Grandma Eleanor, Lily said as she blew out the candles on her cake, "Can I make a wish?" "Of course, my dear. What is your wish?" "That our family keeps growing and being happy forever." Eleanor looked around the table at the strong women who now formed her chosen and biological family, and knew that Lily's wish had already come true. The girl who had saved an old woman from a snake in the Oakhaven Square had, without knowing, saved an entire family from being lost forever. And at that moment, surrounded by love and laughter, Eleanor understood that sometimes miracles come disguised as coincidences, and that the truest families are the ones we choose to love unconditionally. The sun was setting over Oakhaven, but in the yellow house where 4 women lived who had found each other through pain and stayed together through love, each new day was a promise of happiness and renewed hope. If you liked this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story, giving it a score from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.